Hello, welcome back to the latest We Are Sunderland briefing with myself, Tom Short, and Scott Wilson, in association, as ever, with our partners, the Fans Museum and Cospex Opticians. Thanks to you for watching. Thanks for listening. An early plug right at the start that you can still subscribe to We Are Sunderland. It's just £1 for 6 months of content. And judging on the last week and the many transfer rumours and names that have come out, it's going to be a busy summer and a busy few weeks ahead for Sunderland. I'd had some time off, Scott, for 4 or 5 days. We were just chatting about this before we started.
Yeah.
And I was kind of away from it all. And I came back and started to catch up. And I'm like, where on earth do you start? Just an absolute barrage of names, several, I've got to be honest, who I've never heard of.
Well,
a new sporting director coming in. I mean, we'll get into it all, but yeah, interesting to see.
Well, off the back of promotion, we know, don't we, that there's got to be changes at the Stadium of Light. So they've got to tart up the press room and the press facilities a bit. You know, they're putting bits of new. I think they're going to be building about 25 new home dressing rooms, aren't they, to get the squad in at this. I mean, God, it's been a frenzy, hasn't it? Listen, a few things here. I mean, what I would say is this reflects the fact that Sunderland are going to be signing players this summer. They've made it very clear that there's going to be a big overhaul of the squad. So every agent under the sun is putting players into Sunderland. Every kind of, news site, aggregator site, whatever, is picking up little bits of players. Just because Sunderland have held a discussion over a player certainly doesn't mean that they're going to sign them. You know, what's the discussion over a player? Agent X rings up Sunderland. Oh, we hear you're in the market for centre midfielders. Do you like the look of so-and-so? No. There's a discussion over a player. So, all of this we've got to take with a bit of pinch of salt. That said, I think there is substance to some of the talk that's been going on around some specific players. We can get to some of them in a minute. And I think generally it just reinforces the fact that there is going to be a big overhaul of this Sunderland squad this summer. We know there's going to have to be a whole host of outgoings in terms of fringe players, returning loanees, all that kind of stuff. Some of the wheels have been moving there. Ekwa, Alexic looks like he's heading out on loan, those kind of things. But there's also going to be a lot of incomers. When we spoke to Christian Speakman, he said, didn't he? He was talking about maybe 4 or 5 key signings to strengthen the core of the team, first team ready. But then on top of that, adding depth around the fringes, all that kind of stuff. I mean, let's see how it pans out. But wouldn't surprise me if by the end of this summer, like I say, 4 or 5, pretty big name first team ready players, then potentially another 4 or 5 around that of squad players, loanees, etc. But at the same time, probably at least a dozen going out.
And you touched on it there, but of all the names that have come out in the last few weeks, or the last week or so, it's really picked up, hasn't it? As you say, some of them, there will be absolutely no interest, and it will be agents using Sunderland's clout to get the names out there. Some of them, there will have been a call, a scout might have been spotted at the game watching, and then others will clearly be targets that have been identified long before the end of the season, and that Sunderland are going to pursue this summer. We'll get kind of more evidence as to which of those it's going to be as the weeks progress. But regardless, I think what we know from what Christian Speakman said last week when he let on he just come back from speaking to overseas players or players overseas, and all the names that have come out that Sunderland are going to be bringing players in from overseas this summer. Now, I know that might sound obvious, but Ipswich, for example, last summer when they went up, they appeared to go down the route of sign the best players from the Championship the year earlier. So they signed Sammy Smolledge from Blackburn, they signed Jack Clark from Sunderland. Other clubs go down the route of, we just want to add 1 or 2 players. We feel we've got the base of a good squad there. I think it's pretty clear now that Sunderland's significant signings this summer are going to come from overseas, aren't they?
And they're going to follow the general trends that we know that Sunderland have been following. And the main reason for that is because Christian Speakman and Kirill Louis-Dreyfus, and presumably the new incoming sporting director as well, back themselves on the fact that it works. Mm. They've seen the fruits of that in the current squad, haven't they? Look at Eliza Mayenda and what he's now worth after they showed a bit of patience and stuck with him. Look at the profit that was turned on Joe Bellingham. I know he came domestically, but clearly he was an age and a type of player who they felt that they could develop. So I think, I'm not saying it'll exclusively be, because I do still think there'll be a couple of more experienced additions somewhere along the line that might be loans. We saw it with Metham, didn't we? That I think there'll be a couple of those, but predominantly it's going to be younger players. And I think they just feel that if you're signing that type of player permanently, a lot of the overseas markets offer far better value for money than trying to sign players out of the Premier League. Now, when Sunderland were in League One and the Championship, I think they felt that Premier League academies were a good route for them. And we saw a number of players, didn't we, who came in, Ballard, Ekwa, all right, didn't really work with Ekwa, but it clearly did with Ballard, Sirkin, from Premier League academy setups, big clubs where they hadn't quite made it. I think while Sunderland felt that player could then slot into certainly League One, probably the Championship, and succeed, I don't think they can do it. They think that they can do it as easily in the Premier League. If you're a player who's not quite made it at Premier League academy, why are you going to make it in the Premier League with Sunderland? So I think they feel that route that they've exploited quite well in the past is probably shut off now that they're actually in the Premier League. So again, I think that's another reason why they increasingly then turn overseas and look at what they can bring out of those markets. Because, there's just absolutely no doubt that you will get more for your money there than if you're trying to sign proven Premier League players. I mean, look at the prices that your Cunhas have gone for, your Mbuemos have gone for, that, that clubs at the minute are being quoted for tried and tested Premier League players. Sunderland don't, if Sunderland were to try and sign one of those players, that's probably half their budget gone. They feel they can get much better value overseas.
Just on that, the academy thing, the players plucked out the academy, the Premier League academy, given they've had so much success there, and what those players are worth to them now. If Ballard was going to go this summer, what would they fetch for him? Same with Sirkin. Forgetting for a moment his contract situation, which we'll get to. Is there still an argument for signing those sorts of players and loaning them out, signing them for a year or two down the line?
Yeah, I guess there is potentially.
I know it's clearly not a priority. Your priority is strengthening your first
I think
team.
that's the thing this summer. I think the issue this summer is they know that there's an awful lot of restructuring that has to happen with the first team. So that's got to be the priority. That's got to be where the vast majority of whatever the transfer budget is committed to. Yeah, in an ideal world, you would do that. You'd look to strengthen all areas of the club. You know what I mean? You'd look at development players. You'd look at bringing players, everything. And there probably will be still some of that. But that's not the priority this summer. The priority this summer is to get the first team ready for that first 2 or 3 games of the season and make sure Sunderland can have a right go of it in the Premier League. That's the be all and end all really this summer.
A priority at the start of the summer wouldn't have been bringing in a new sporting director. You wouldn't have thought. I mean, that one was a bolt from the blue, a real curveball last week. There's still no confirmation, but Florent Ghisolfi, apologies, I'm going to butcher that many pronunciations. May as well start as we mean to.
I think we all are, to be fair.
But what do you make of that then? And what's your kind of understanding of it?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, it did come as a bolt from the blue. We when we spoke to Christian Speakman earlier this summer, we covered a whole range of topics. None of us that were there thought about asking, well, are you going to be bringing in the technical director, sport director, whatever he's going to be, head of football, whatever he ends up being titled. Because it just didn't really seem on the cards, did it? But, fair play to Louis Dreyfus and Speakman here. It looks very much like they've gone out and got someone who's been massively in demand right across Europe and comes with a real pedigree. And then I guess as well, we will have to see how his role dovetails with what Christian Speakman has been doing and will continue to do. But all the indications from the club very, very strongly are this is not a case of Ghisolfi coming in, Speakman going out. Speakman is still going to be there. He's still going to be as influential and powerful as he's ever been. So I guess the fact that he's open to this and wants the support, feels he needs the support, fair play to him for it as well, for kind of accepting that. And we're told that he's very much been one of the key people driving this appointment, that, this isn't Louis Dreyfus saying, right, I'm bringing him in, like it or lump it. Absolutely not. Speakman's been involved in this process all the way through. So I think it was interesting, because what he did say when we spoke to him, and this was more in relation to the coaching staff, was he said, you need to strengthen the squad in the Premier League, but you actually need to strengthen a whole host of other areas in the club. And we took that as meaning there'll be other coaches coming in, and I think there will be. But I guess now in hindsight, there maybe was a little nod there to the fact that even at executive level, being in the Premier League makes completely different demands of you than being in League One or being in the Championship. So again, I think it's just a case of Sunderland wanting to do everything they can to give themselves the best possible chance of succeeding next season. And I think we all know that means staying up, doesn't it?
And when Speakman says, and he said a couple of times since winning promotion, the journey doesn't end here. Our aim has always been not getting to the Premier League, but getting to the Premier League and then staying there and then kicking on again. Well, I guess appointments like that, moves like that, bold moves like that, back that up, don't they? Show that it's not just words, that Sunderland are also willing to put that into action.
Yeah, and I think it's an acceptance that when everything went wrong for Sunderland, when we had the back-to-back relegations, when the club was, let's be frank, in absolute crisis, it wasn't just the first team playing staff that got hollowed out and diminished and ripped apart, if you like. It was every level of the club. And so clearly a massive focus has to be on rebuilding the actual playing squad, because ultimately that's what you get judged on. That's what's going to dictate where Sunderland can get to. But at various points of the journey back up through the leagues, we've seen off-field improvements. We've seen new appointments. We've seen new roles created. And I guess this is just the next step in that, isn't it? It feels like quite a big one, but then the promotion of the Premier League is quite a big thing, isn't it? So I think it's just part of that process of rebuilding the football club, getting them Premier League ready, getting them to a point where they can kick on and establish themselves in the Premier League. And also, dare I say it, and I understand why no one at the club would probably want to say this, but also ensuring that if they can't stay up next season, we're not in the crisis situation that we saw when the last relegations happened. Sunderland are not going into this new season thinking we might get relegated. But what they are doing is making pretty damn sure that if that does happen, they're in a really strong position and it's not going to rip the heart out of the club like it did last time around.
And given what we were saying there, just one more on Ghisolfi, given what we were saying there about the type of player Sunderland are clearly going to be targeting, or look to be targeting, some of the profile of player, and given everything we read about Ghisolfi's extensive contacts book in Europe, it makes sense, doesn't it?
Oh, I'd love to know if he actually has a contacts book. It's classic football talk. I've never actually seen a transfer watershed.
Through Del Boy style with his
actually seen a contacts book. Yeah, but I'd love to think.
I still have a contacts book somewhere.
If we ever get the chance to sit down with him, I will ask that question. Do you have? Maybe next time we do speak, we'll ask him that. Christian, do you have a contacts book?
Just settle an argument. Just settle an argument.
Yeah, I mean, it marries up with what Sunderland are looking to do this summer, isn't it? All what we've talked about, the markets they're looking at, the type of players they're looking at, the agents they're going to be dealing with, the clubs they're going to be dealing with. If you've got someone who's absolutely embedded within that in continental Europe, then that can only help, can't it? It can only be of benefit. And I'm sure that was a big factor in why Sunderland have gone for him, rather than domestic candidates who might have been available.
And a little bit of news as we talk here, actually, Sunderland have just confirmed that W88 is their new principal partner and front of shirt partner for the coming season.
I think we've all seen some of the rip-off kit designs floating around the internet, haven't we? Some of which are far more believable than others with it on.
Which is another opportunity to plug for the piece you did a couple of months ago.
Yes.
Shirts.
David Bruce.
We'll get that in the show notes. As part of the most significant commercial agreement in the club's history, the leading sports betting and online casino operator also becomes the club's front of shirt partner. The Ashley Pedden, Chief Commercial Officer, we are delighted to be partnering with W88, who possess a proven track record. The agreement represents the largest commercial deal in the club's history and will contribute significantly towards enabling the club to compete in the Premier League. I mean, these sorts of things all matter, don't they?
Oh, and even more so in the whole PSR world that we're living in and that Sunderland now are having to operate in. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's... being in the Premier League opens doors, doesn't it? And for however long Sunderland are in it, they have to make the most of that. They have to maximise that. And so deals like that, are clearly sponsorship deals have been important since time began, and sponsors first came into football. Don't get me wrong, but it's even more important now with the way the PSR rules work. We see that, we see that right across the game that all that side of it just becomes more and more important.
We're not going to obviously focus on all of the individual names that have come out in the last week because we'd be here forever and a day.
I'd have to click through my contacts book.
When was the last time I spoke to Vladislav Van Tat's representative? There's another pronunciation budget. But there's a couple that are interesting, I think. Marcin Bulka, the goalkeeper, Fabrizio Romano, who will have a contacts book, I'm sure of it.
He must have a contacts book. I think it'll be a well thumbed contacts book.
Well, he's been pretty strong on that this week. The Nice goalkeeper, Poland international. I'm sure I wasn't the only one, instinctively thinking when I saw that. What about Anthony Patterson? That feels a surprise link, does it not?
So Sunderland will be looking to strengthen in every position. For all that they were great last season, it's hard to argue that there's not a position on the pitch where there's the potential to upgrade in the Premier League. So the fact they're looking at a goalkeeper is not a kind of massive surprise. And I guess what you would say at the minute is it's really Patterson and no one else. I mean, I know Simon Moore has been there and all of this, but really, Patterson is the only show in town with Sunderland.
Matty Young's still a couple of years
Matty
off.
Young's still far away. Blondie and QA, that's another pronunciation.
when you went there, I thought this is a brave.
This is going to be interesting. But ultimately it's Patterson and nobody else, isn't it? So Sunderland do need a goalkeeper. There's no doubt about that. I feel sorry for Patterson if he was one of the ones that when Sunderland went up, didn't really get a look in at the Premier League. And I know that's a bit of sentiment, but, local kid, come through all the leagues with them, did really well, I thought, in the Championship last season, made those crucial saves at Wembley. I mean, you forget just that early save from Kiefer Moore's header. I mean, that's as good a save as any goalkeeper produced all season. It would be a shame, but listen, it's hard-headed, isn't it? This is football. This is the business. This is the sport. I can't, like a lot of these targets, I can't pretend I've watched Polish football or French Ligue 1 football to the extent that I am absolutely abreast of him. But the reputation he comes with, the level he's got to. It's not hard to construct an argument that he would be an upgrade on Patterson, but it would still feel a bit harsh on Patterson if he didn't get a chance in the Premier League, wouldn't it? Do you not think?
And this is clearly, this is very, very early and speculative. But if Bulka comes in and he came in with the idea of him being a number one, do you cash in on Patterson or do you keep him can you keep him as a? I mean, clearly we're taking a leap here. This is all.
We are taking a leap, yeah. I mean, I think for the reasons I've spoken about, you'd want to keep him if you could, because then you've got two top-class keepers. If you sell Patterson, you've probably still got to bring in another number two, haven't you? Because, if Bulka was your number one and then something was to happen with him, would you want any of the other keepers on the books playing for 6 months in a row if they had to? I doubt it. So I think ideally you'd want to keep him, but you've then got to convince him. Look, you've got a genuine chance of this. It's not a case of a clear number one and a clear number. We'll have to see how that all plays out. But I've got to admit, I'm with you. When I saw that and it it felt as strong as it did because of clearly who's been bandying it about on online. And the little bits that we hear, I do genuinely think there's something in this. That's one of the ones that I don't think is just a complete flyer. I do think there's something in this from little bits I hear around the club and everything. It's probably not a surprise because, like I say, I did feel that they need to sign a keeper, but feels a bit harsh on Patterson.
There's also been a couple of left backs linked.
Yeah.
Now, you did the piece back end of last week, weekend, early this week on Sirkin and Sirkin's contract situation. And what you clearly have to say is if there's a left back linked, that doesn't mean that Dennis Sirkin's going to move. If there's a right back linked, that doesn't mean Trey Hume's going to move. Someone need depth, they need cover, they need competition in certain areas. But what's the latest on Sirkin and his contract and his future and Tottenham?
Well, I think it's Tottenham that makes this interesting because as things stand, Tottenham don't satisfy the Champions League criteria for home developed players. They have to address that before they submit their Champions League squad. So somehow they've got to get somebody in who satisfies that criteria. Now, that either means promoting someone from their kind of under 18, under 21 setup to take up a space in that squad where you wouldn't normally want that happening because they're not going to play, or signing someone who satisfies the criteria. That's a very small pool of players for Tottenham. Kyle Walker-Peters, interestingly, would, and he's potentially available. But the suggestion, certainly from people that we've spoken to down in London and who are well connected with Spurs, is that they are quite interested in Sirkin if the price was right, because A, they feel it's a signing that they might be interested in making anyway because they think he's a good left back who could get even better. But B, it solves that problem for them. Now, that then obviously spills over to the fact with Sunderland that he, like Dan Neil, is going into the last year of his contract. What I think next week officially contracts change over, don't they? So with both Neil and Sirkin, there is a gun to the head's not right, but the clock is ticking with both of those players. And what Sunderland clearly and understandably would not want to do is get to January in the second half of next season when from January they'd be able to talk to overseas clubs and sign pre-contract agreements. Next summer they're obviously able to leave for nothing. So, or at least a development fee in Neil's case as an academy product that would be nowhere near clearly what he'd be actually worth on the open market. So contract talks with both of those players will be a key priority in the next month or so once they're back from holidays into pre-season, their agents are back, all of that kind of stuff. That's going to be a massive priority. And if there's a suggestion that those players are going to be reluctant to sign new deals, then Sunderland will have a decision to make on them. That's just hard-headed business. They will, because I don't think they can, well, they can, clearly you can afford to do anything, can't you? If you want to, you can. But financially, it will be a massive hit to not realise the value of those players and then leave for effectively nothing next summer.
And just to wrap up then, timelines. It's 50 days today. We're recording this Friday morning. It's different day. It is Friday, isn't it? I'm all over the days this week. It's 50 Friday. Days today till the start of the Premier League season. It feels like transfer-wise, everything has been brought forward a little bit this summer anyway because of the Club World Cup, because of the rush in certain quarters to get deals done. It's clearly still far too early to have anything like a panic on that Sunderland haven't signed any players yet. But when do you think all of these names will start to materialise?
I think we will start to see genuine movement before the start of pre-season. And what's that? That's going to be probably a couple of weeks away now. No more than that. I think the players are actually in before that for the start of their testing and stuff. But the real pre-season probably starts in a couple of weeks' time. If you're Regis Labris, you're not wanting to start pre-season with no new additions and your Pierre Ekwes, your Abdullah Bars, your Lewis Hamiyas, all of them turning back up and effectively getting in the way with the greatest will in the world of what you want to do, are you? So I think certainly in terms of the outgoings of some of those fringe players, ideally Sunderland would want to get some of that moving before pre-season, because otherwise pre-season just becomes more awkward to organise and just the logistics of it become more difficult than it needs to be. And then secondly, clearly in an ideal world, you would like to get at least some of your signings through the door, if not for the start of pre-season, then probably when you're going away for the trips and things. Sunderland obviously heading to Portugal, playing a couple of matches there. I think ideally you want some new faces in then that you can at least start bedding them in and getting to know them and getting to know the group, because otherwise you're spending half your pre-season putting together a team that's not going to be playing come the actual business of the season. So yeah, I think in the next fortnight we will start to see genuine movement. I think, you know, a reasonable chunk of it's probably going to be out, but I think there'll be ins as well.
Brilliant. Well, we'll wrap up there. Thanks again to our partners, the Fans Museum, Cospex Optician. Thanks to you for watching. Do subscribe if you haven't already. That's just the button below the screen you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on your podcast platforms, then rate and review. And we'll be back next week, and there'll no doubt be a whole host of new names for us to try and work our way through. And we'll use our contacts book to get to the bottom of those links as they emerge. But yeah, as Scott says, you would imagine some concrete news, some concrete transfer news will start to materialise over the next week or two. So keep your eyes on We Are Sunderland. Subscribe, as we said at the start, it's just £1 for 6 months, which gets you 6 months of content for We Are Sunderland, which obviously sees you into the start of the new Premier League season. And we'll be back next week with our next We Are Sunderland briefing. Take care.